All right, welcome back to the Seth and Gentry show, and by welcome back, I don't mean that we were here just a second ago. We were here a week ago talking about Missouri. Now we've been to Missouri. Before we get into the game, Gentry, your impressions of first time in Missouri, Columbia, all that?
Well, it was a nice trip. Nice people, really nice people. They seem to be taking the SEC thing seriously, and it was a big weekend in Missouri. But I don't want to be critical of it, but I just don't think it's the kind of place that's really going to terrify opposing teams in the league just yet.
Yeah.
I think they're getting there.
Stadium's open-ended. That's something we observed before the game, and it kind of turned out that way. It's not very. The fans aren't really on top of you.
Right. I mean, it's noisy.
Acoustics
it's not. It's not Tiger Stadium. It's not Neyland Stadium, but it's. Missouri's got a good team. They'll be in the middle of the pack probably in the East.
They'll assimilate to the SEC probably over time, and we discovered that we're not going to stay in St. Louis next time, or if we do, we're going to hope the game gets moved to St. Louis. There's nothing on that drive from St. Louis to Columbia, is there?
No, and not only that, when you're making it at, I guess, 2 in the morning or whatever it was we were doing, no sleep Sunday or Saturday night. Not a whole lot of sleep last night. Still recovering, so that was it didn't feel like a trip to the Southeast.
And if we seem really off in this video, let's just say that's why, even though we're just not very smart to begin with. I'm not.
Georgia's team got back Saturday night. They're practicing behind us right now. Kind of a short little Monday walkthrough kind of practice where they clean up stuff from last week, and now they go ahead to Florida Atlantic this week, and probably not as much hype for this one this time.
Probably just a little bit less. Florida Atlantic. What was it you were looking up? Their beat writer in a newspaper. What did he write about Florida Atlantic after their opener?
Yeah, basically the first line of his blog was that it's clear now that 2012 is going to be a long, painful year for Florida Atlantic, and you're talking about a team that went 1-11 last year. They have a new coach. It's probably not going to be the best team Georgia plays this year.
Arkansas situation.
No, same conference, but I think that this to me is probably the easiest team on the schedule.
All right, the Missouri game. What did we glean from this? You look at the final score. People that didn't watch it, it's 41-20. Everyone that did watch it knows that Georgia was down for most of it, then just wrested control back. Did you glean from this that Georgia's defense is just going to kind of rise up and win out a lot of the times, or did you come out with still some concerns about Georgia, both on offense and defense?
Considering they were shorthanded at some key spots, I thought Georgia played remarkably well in this game. The 2 touchdowns that were allowed were both on big plays. For the most part, Missouri struggled to run the ball. The 100-something yards rushing they got was their lowest total since 2010. James Franklin in particular ends up with 25 rushing yards on 20 attempts.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing. They concentrated on that. They said he's not going to beat us. That's what Tucker and them told us after the game. They made sure that if they got beat by James Franklin, it was going to be through the air. And he did for a couple drives there. He did.
Well, and so Georgia learned their lesson from the week before. But I also think when you're playing 5 and 6 defensive backs as they were the whole game, if you're able to stop the run like that, it shows you won the battle up front.
And this is where getting Sanders Cummings back now going forward is going to be so big. We'll see what happens with Malcolm Mitchell. But if Malcolm Mitchell stays on defense for a while, that's going to allow Sanders Cummings to play safety until Bakari Rambo comes back. Even when Bakari Rambo comes back, you've got more depth there at cornerback. And God love Devin Bowman, Connor Norman, guys like that. They got exposed a little bit at times.
Yeah, and it's just a little unfair to think Devin Bowman in his second college game to put him in a situation like that. I mean, I think other than the 1 touchdown, he played pretty well when he was out there.
But that front seven for Georgia, I mean, it was comical sometimes. We observed this in the press box that we were watching. There were a couple plays where they would do a misdirection handoff, Missouri would, and Cornelius Washington or Jarvis Jones would be following the guy that the fake handoff was to, and then just go, okay, and turn around and just elbow Franklin or whoever had the ball, and they were down. That had to be a lesson to Missouri of, hey, you're not in the Big 12 anymore.
Well, if Missouri's going to be competitive in the SEC and beat some good teams this year, their offensive line's going to have to play a lot better. They didn't hold their blocks very well against Georgia. Georgia was able to rush 4 the whole game and get lots of pressure, mostly on the edges with Jarvis Jones and Cornelius Washington. I realize most teams don't have a Jarvis Jones, but still, Missouri's offensive line wasn't very good. They were pretty weak at tackle, and they had their left tackle
and they got 2 guys hurt. Their left tackle looked like he's going to be out for the South Carolina game in a couple weeks. So basically, it's very, very likely that on October, when is that game? The 6th, I want to say. First Saturday in October, I think. It's going to be Georgia, South Carolina, unbeaten, definitely top 10 possibly top 5, depending on.
It looks that way. It looks that way. I mean, Tennessee's got to come to Athens first.
Yeah. Well, in terms of what this means for Georgia's season, Gentry, I had this Missouri game, along with 3 others, as games for Georgia that were losable, with Tennessee kind of as game 5, depending on how they looked. Auburn is not, which is one of those 4 that I had, is not looking like a game at this point. Now, it's played way in the distance, and it's at Auburn, but that's not looking like one that should be much trouble for Georgia. You may bring Tennessee in now to the mix in a few weeks as being the big one, but I see what haven't gotten past Georgia, I think, or gotten past Missouri. I think if you're a Georgia fan, you're pretty optimistic because 10-2 is almost kind of a baseline now.
Well, and I think during the preseason, Missouri was the game that everybody kind of looked at, and that's to find out where Georgia's all about. And let's be honest, though, it was not a flawless performance. Georgia didn't blow out Missouri. The 21 points wasn't really indicative of how close that game really was. And I think if you're Georgia, some of the bigger concerns, although the defense played really well.
Against a better team, Murray has to be more consistent. You can't just wake up late in the first half, turn it on, and everything will be fine.
Well, and the protection wasn't outstanding for a lot of the game, and you know that Georgia was banged up a little bit up front, and that was part of it. You didn't really get a running game going. Gurley broke one late, but you know when Georgia got it was effective. They were able to spread the field.
Disagree with me if you want to, but Georgia's never going to have a running game this year that's going to impose its will on other defenses unless that defense is severely overmatched. I haven't seen it yet.
Well,
are you about to disagree?
I think we've got to see. I want to see the offensive line when it's healthy. When your right tackle has played more than 2 college games, and
your left tackle still feeling his way.
Yeah, there were times
last year. The center has a few more games.
There were times last year when they were able to run the ball in good teams. South Carolina and Auburn come to mind pretty, but at the same time, you've got your money players, your quarterback.
The point is when their passing game wasn't going in the first half against Missouri, they didn't have any offense. And South Carolina is probably the best defense they're going to face, and they're going to have to.
Here's the thing: they have to stay out of their own way. That entire first half, it was you get a key third down, you have a false start penalty. You get a nice gain on first down, you have a penalty that knocks you back instead of second and 4, you're second and 9. So now you're having to throw the ball a little more.
There were a few drop passes.
Yeah, and I just think they're not totally sharp on that side of the ball. But I will say every time that Missouri punched Georgia's defense hard, got a touchdown, Georgia responded.
Right.
Both Missouri touchdowns were met with Georgia touchdowns on the very next drive. That's a good sign. That's a very positive sign that Georgia still definitely got some things to work on offensively. They got things to work on defensively, but I think the fact that you're able to win this game, win it going away shorthanded, obviously you do feel confident.
You can't write off the Vanderbilt game, and you can't write off the Tennessee game, obviously, but what you come out of this saying is to be 2-0 and to have the schedule in front of you before South Carolina, which could decide the division, is just very advantageous for Georgia at this point. They've got some time to work some of this stuff out that was exposed at Missouri.
Yeah, and I think that Florida Atlantic won't present much of a challenge, and I think Georgia will be ready to play against Vanderbilt. I've kind of thought that the whole time, given how that game went last year. And Tennessee, I think we'll find out a lot about Tennessee this week when they host Florida. That'll be a real big game for them.
I'm not sold on Tennessee yet, but I'm open to being convinced.
Florida's got a good defense, even with some injuries, and it'll be interesting to see if Tennessee can do what they did to NC State to Florida. But I think you knew going into the season the East looks wide open. Georgia just couldn't stub their toe early, and they didn't. They got through it. So see what happens the rest of the way.
That was a big game for the program. It always sounds like such a high, all-encompassing kind of term. But it was a big.
Not just that they won it, but the way they won it. They overcame adversity. It was the kind of game that you could just see going against them in a tough environment where they're on their heels a little bit, and they responded. And it helps when you have a guy who I probably think is the best defensive player.
You know what it's a little bit similar to, and we're going to have to wrap this up because we're trying to make 10 minutes our limit, but it's a little bit similar to LSU against Georgia last year. LSU was being outplayed for the vast majority of that first half, and then Matthew did his thing, and Georgia responded late in the first half there and imposed at will, and the final score ended up being a runaway. A little bit like that. I'm not saying Georgia's going to win the national championship. I'm just saying in terms of the game itself, that's what it resembled a little bit. Okay,
I got 10 seconds.
Again, I'm not saying Maybe they do. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Tune in next week when hopefully we do remember to do.
And hopefully do a little better job.
Yeah. Talk to you later.